Hello everyone. Today we have Eileen Barker and we'll be talking about new religious movements. So Eileen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, as you said, my name is Eileen Barker. I'm Professor Emeritus of Sociology with special reference to the study of religion at the London School of Economics. And I've been studying minority religions most of my academic career, in fact all of it. And I've founded an organisation called Inform, which is an educational charity which offers information that's as objective and unbiased, up-to-date and contextualised as possible to anybody who wants to have that information. And Inform has been based at the London School of Economics, but we're just at this moment moving to King's College, London. We answer inquiries, as I suggested. We also have seminars and conferences to which we invite everybody. They're open. We have workshops which are closed for particular groups of people like the police or social services or the clergy. But the seminars are day-long and open to anyone, and we invite people to talk from different perspectives about particular topics. So some of the topics we've talked about are minority religions and the state and the law and education and the afterlife and gender and the millennium, all sorts of different issues. And we'll have people from different walks of life, different perspectives talking. So we've had Hizmet members, we have members of groups, their opponents, relatives of them. We have professionals, academics, police, lawyers, people who have something to say about the topic. And then we have a book series, the Inform Routledge series, which has some of these topics, issues addressed again by people from different perspectives.
So in minority religions, do you mean like for this country minority as non-Church of England?
It's not, well, I wouldn't call the Church of England or the Methodists or the Roman Catholic Church minority, although they are statistically. But we used to talk about new religious movements, what people call cults or sects, but usually they're being rather pejorative when they use those words. So we preferred new religious movements, but many of the religions that we talk about are perhaps 19th century religions like Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons, Christadelphians, etc. And a lot of the so-called new religious movements aren't particularly new now. They're in second, third or more generations. So we just use minority religion without defining it very widely.
So roughly how many new religious movements that, for instance, you have encountered or you are keeping in touch?
We have some information on over 5,000 different religious organizations, but there are over 1,000 religions that are active in England at the moment that we have on file. We're in touch with several hundred, and we have an international network of scholars and people who, from either professional or personal reasons, have had contact with the religions or have some interest in them for some purpose.
I see. So is every new religious movement you mention can be categorized as a cult or denomination, sect, group, or?
Well, scholars of religion have tended not to use those terms lately because people think of that. There's a whole lot of baggage that comes with those terms, which are usually negative. I mean, people don't say, I belong to a cult. Somebody else says, you belong to a cult, or they belong to a cult. So that's why we don't categorize them ourselves, but we are aware that other people do. And a lot of the movements that we study are those that people call cults and sects.
So, I mean, is that necessarily a good thing, bad thing outside? Like for instance, when a group is deemed as cult, for instance, that's the worst term perhaps. in the popular culture that you can use against a group
That
in a way.
tells you more about the speaker than about the movement. It doesn't tell you very much about the movement. It tells you that the speaker doesn't like or approve of them.
I see. So it is actually a stigmatization in a way.
It is now, yes. I mean, we have got a way of talking about it in the social sciences, which is not necessarily value-laden at all. But it's so popularly negative, the term, that we prefer to start from a non-evaluative basis and then see whether they are good or bad. And some of them certainly do negative things and are bad. But to start from assuming that they are is not very helpful. Just as to start assuming that they're all good would not be very helpful. You find out. That's what social science does.
Yeah,
it tries to find out.
You study them, before you name or put them into a box. In that case, for instance, is there a point for the viewers? I have just watched your presentation, but I want that part. Is there a point where this word cult become a really, really negative term in recent years? We can pinpoint a certain issue, certain incidents that really shifted.
People became more aware of what we call the new religion movement as cults. I think probably in the 60s, but the big turning point was probably in 1978 at the time of the Jonestown People's Temple. This was Jim Jones set up the People's Temple in Jonestown, Guyana, in the forest jungle there. And a congressman came to look at it. And as he was leaving, he was actually killed. And then Jim Jones ordered that the members would all commit suicide or murder over 200 children. There were 900 plus who died. And this, not surprisingly, hit the headlines throughout the world. Dangerous cult, dangerous sect, evil sect. And so this word has come to be associated with horrors like that, real tragedies. And there were a few before, like the Manson family or Symbionese Liberation Army, but they weren't quite as globalized in spreading our sort of horror as indeed it was.
This incident was like a bit ISIS and terrorism, how it made it, world famous, a global phenomenon. So in that case, apart from the definition or the meaning, the history of the term and terminology, among the groups that you are studying or you are keeping information or trying to keep a research about, what is the percentage of them roughly can have those negative connotations, like violent, committing suicide and this and that? Can you say majority of them are showing cultic behavior in all the new religious movements, or is it a minority, or is it hard to say?
Depends what you mean by cultic behavior, of course.
Like the way it is popular culture describes them as cult, total obedience and self-harm and harming others.
Very, very few harm others. Some of them harm other people that they know, perhaps, who they see as threatening them. For example, Synanon put a flat stake in the letterbox of a lawyer that was investigating them. But the vast majority are no more harmful than the mainstream religions. Sometimes less harmful, perhaps sometimes slightly more harmful to their members. And different members react in different ways. What is a wonderful life of service to God is exploitation to somebody else. What is seen as bad. A Baptist mother might think that her daughter is going to burn in hell forever because she's joined a Hindu movement. The Hindu might think that the daughter is going to have bad karma and come back as a snake or something in the next life because they've eaten meat. Whereas, so you can't really generalize, but most new religions or cults, if you want to call them, are no more harmful than the mainstream churches, which have done a lot of harm. I mean, we know that a lot of them have been carrying out child abuse lately, and that's hit the headlines. But if you look throughout history, the wars, the Crusades, the Inquisition, I mean, terrible things, and now are being done by mainstream churches and mainstream religions of all the Abrahamic and indeed the Eastern religions, Hinduism and Buddhism.
See, you were in the presentation also talking about that actually these new religious movements don't necessarily bring anything new that hasn't brought before in the previous religious formations or interpretations. So how do they identify themselves as a different group
Well,
than
when
others?
I said nothing new, I meant no actions. Well, I mean, some of them have, like Scientology, for example, uses the e-meter, which is two tin cans that are attached to a meter that moves around and is meant to show your reaction to certain experiences that you've had in the past. I mean, that's newish, at least. You know, people have done lie tests and detecting things, but there are new structures, new puttings together so that they're different. Like hydrogen and high oxygen make water, but in another combination they make hydrogen peroxide. So they're always new in some way. They'll have new leaders, new structures, new cultures perhaps, or just new members. I now define a new religious movement as one that is predominantly first generation membership, that is a convert. But so there are certain ways in which there's nothing new in this world, but there are other ways in which they're all new, and all religions were new when they came into being and separated themselves in some way from other religions.
So in that sense, if you were to identify a new religious movements, how many subtopics you would use? Like you mentioned a number of them in the presentation. So would you like to list them again? So then we can move on specific topics. You know, like how would you identify new religious movements? What would you look at in what aspects?
I would look at all the aspects. I think what I tried to do in the talk was to identify some of the characteristics that you might find quite frequently in new religions, but I wanted to stress very strongly that you cannot generalize about them. They will differ from each other in one way or another. There's nothing that you can be sure of beyond, the definition, which of course you're not discovering anything, but I would look at their beliefs, I would look at their practices, their rituals, their authority structure, their attitudes towards women, towards children and education, their sexual practices, how they interacted with the rest of society, how the rest of society interacted with them, how they changed over time, all sorts of things.
So in a way, it's more sensible to look at them individually and
it's essential to look at them individually, but knowing that there are certain characteristics you find quite often can sensitize you to looking to see whether there is a charismatic leader who's unbound by rules and tradition, what kind of people that particular movement appeals to, because it's very unlikely that it will appeal to a normal distribution of the population. Sometimes it appeals to the oppressed, sometimes, like in the 70s in the West, to young, middle-class, well-educated white people.
And sometimes underprivileged lower class.
Absolutely. The Rastafarians appeal to blacks, young black men particularly, for example. So you can't generalize. You could just sort of look and see whether it is the case that one thing rather than another is the case.